fascinating event. I've been looking forward actually to it ever since I first heard about it. And just to give credit where credit is due, this event was underway before I became interim VP for research. And I want to acknowledge Ken Gertz and Ann Geronimo in particular, who had a lot to do with catalyzing it, as well as who I'll mention a little later. It's clear to all of us on a day-to-day basis that we're living in the midst of a revolution in how we deal with information. We wake up in the morning and open the Post and see very sophisticated analyses of the distribution of DoD-funded activities in our region. We come home in the evening, and I find it very interesting to see how the news channels are trying to integrate new digital age approaches into their traditional broadcasting format. A year ago, as I was saying, this actually began a whole year ago, the Division of Research pulled together a group of faculty to begin a discussion as to the level at which we wanted to get engaged in this new playing field. The central question is, what are the grand challenges of this era? How will the revolution in information technology affect the way libraries function, the way schools of journalism train students, the way we educate students all the way from preschool through to postdoctoral students? How will the massive amount of information which we can now generate be analyzed, stored, archived, distributed, and shared? How will new media like social networking and other new sources of communicating affect the world in which we live and our daily lives? There are many reasons to think that we should make a deep commitment to this area. We have a wonderful location in terms of all of the activities that the Washington community is involved in. The expertise and interest across campus are already developed relationships with the Smithsonian, with the Library of Congress, and with the National Archives. And so it certainly is timely to explore whether we should work to develop a cross-campus, interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary research initiative that would position the University of Maryland as a key participant in the national policy dialogue on these issues. So out of the early discussions, the steering committee was formed with representatives from journalism, the library, the iSchool, the new college of CMNS, Arts and Humanities, Engineering, and the Business School, and I noticed representatives from many of those schools here today, who planned this campus forum to explore various aspects of moving the initiative forward. So I want to thank the steering committee, particularly Allison Bruin, who just made opening remarks, Ira Chinoy from the School of Journalism, and Ann Geronimo from the Office of the VP of Research for their work in planning this event. So I'm sure this is going to, as I say, to be a really change-making discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. Welcome to everybody.
Thank you, Norma. I'm going to just introduce a few people that have actually been responsible for this. And first of all, I want to ask anybody that was in the working group for this forum if you all would stand for a moment. Ira, John, Sabrina, Neil, Pat, Ken, and just so that you see that this is these people, amazing what they pulled off. Keep standing. There are, what among you don't realize, there are 17 leaders here that are going to be brainstorming with you today. Will those 17 leaders please stand up? Okay, fabulous. All right, keep standing. Will those 17 scribes that are going to be taking down the brainstorming work, please stand. Okay. All right, there are 10 registration helpers. Could you all please stand? Okay, wonderful. And then And then there are 5 video streaming people that also help to make this happen. This is being streamed live. Will you please all stand as well? Okay. And then it turns out there are, thank you for pointing that eyeball everywhere. Okay, there's 200 plus participants either through streaming or through in this room. And to all of you, we say thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so you get the idea that the future of information, okay, might have to do with an awful lot of people, an awful lot of ideas, an awful lot of thinking about things together. And so let me just set the stage for you just for a moment, and then I'm gonna pass it to the center of attention for today, if you will. So let's first start thinking about information. Okay. When we think about information, we know that knowing information or not knowing information can change lives. We also know that information can bring people together, and it's a very powerful way of moving forward. We also know that it can inspire innovation and change our world in a lot of different ways. Now let's think about the future. And if we think about the future, rethinking the meaning of information, that's a very important thing that has just begun, has always been going on, but it's something that we are now acknowledging through our technologies and through our discussions and communication. And it's something that we imagine you all will be talking about today. We're also been talking a great deal about rethinking our relationship to information. And again, something that we will probably be speaking about today in a much greater detail. And finally, rethinking the technologies that might be transforming. This feels like disco lighting going back and forth. Basically, speaking of technology and lighting, how does it transform our experiences? How does it transform our relationships? How does it transform our information? All of these things, technology is a catalyst. It can be a stumbling block. It can be many different things. And again, what we hope that you all will be able to discuss and think about today will have to do with this. Now, I put all of this up on the slide because there's a cacophony of noise going on across our campus and across our research disciplines and across pretty much the world. People are all trying to figure this out. What does the future of information mean? And right now it looks like this. How do we decipher what matters? How do we think about where we need to move forward, what we need to be doing? And that's why, hopefully, all of you are here in the room together to think about. So, as Norma pointed out, it started with a cross-campus task force where people came together from many different colleges. It moved into a steering committee that started to think about how to, what were the first steps that we might take in thinking about this in a cross-campus way. And then finally into a forum working group that actually has been responsible for making this happen. So in terms of this forum, what are we hoping that may come about? Certainly in trying to understand what is happening today on our campus. There are so many of you in all different places, from etymology to architecture, to the iSchool, to libraries, to journalism. There's so many of you all here from so many wonderful places. In fact, Ira was staying up late at night trying to put together the list so that you all could see that this is an important thing to many people in all different parts of our community. We hope to develop cross-campus efforts, and what that might be is up to all of you, up to all of us to figure out together. And we hope to be able to leverage our external relationships that we have with partners currently and with new partners in the future, as well as our internal resources to become what we think will be the leaders in this area, okay? And that the goal, ultimately, of this first gathering, so remember this date, This is the beginning of when we, as a campus, will lead in the future of information. So, what are we beginning to do? An online community to collect and assess what we're doing currently. And so the website that you all registered in today, and thank you Sabrina Lau wherever you are, because you're a hero in putting that together. Thank you very much. That will be expanded out, and so that shortly you will be able to edit your information, add to your information that you may or may not have been able to put in because you were panicked to get a seat at the table. And we will also make sure that you will be able to see what other people are doing across campus. So it will be a way for people to start to share information online. Now, here, this forum, you'll notice we have exactly one keynote speaker, and then after that, it's all up to you. And it's not that this keynote speaker is pretty, divested from, here's my great ideas and he's going to run and catch a plane. This keynote speaker actually helped to develop the brainstorming process that you all are going to be experiencing. In fact, you need to listen to his keynote really carefully, because all of our brainstorming is going to be based on his talk. And so we are absolutely indebted to him for starting this brainstorming process, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him. But again, it's an unusual thing to have just one speaker and then we spend the day brainstorming together to figure out outcomes. But it's a very important first step. We really, when we started thinking about this, to be honest folks, we thought there'd be 50 people in the room and we would, and we'd probably all share ideas and go home. We had no idea the interest across campus would be as enormous as it was, and we're very excited to have that be the case. In terms of meeting all of you, it should be pointed out that already this forum has started connections. Wayne McClintock, wherever you are from Vsauce, Wayne may be here, yeah? Okay, Wayne, there you go. Wayne is, in honor of this forum, we are actually going to be collaborating between the iSchool and Vsauce, and we are hoping that that many other colleges will see this as an instigation to start to collaborate between, and so they actually have funding from NSF to start interdisciplinary collaborations, and so this is just a beginning. So we hope that these kinds of things will happen as we go forward. So we'll have working groups, forum working groups and presentations for the outcome of this, but we also hope that there'll be campus working groups that will start to be formed, and that will be facilitated through the working group and the steering committee that's been formed. But the idea is, it's not just about good talk here, folks. This is about how we're going to make it happen. So, speaking of making it happen, there's a man named Dan Russell. And it turns out that I got to know Dan a while ago. I don't even remember how long ago. Anyway, I had the good fortune of being able to do some research with him having to do with kids, and actually mostly I kept poking at him, kept saying, doesn't Sergey care about kids? Come on, come on, come on. Anyway, eventually, since Dan realized I wasn't going away, he figured, okay, I better work with her. Anyway, so we've been working together for a while, which has just been wonderful. And so Dan inspired me in my teaching, and so what I did was, I have a final project in one of my classes where I say, you work for Sergey Brin at Google, and he's tired. He's tired of all the same old things that they normally do at Google. He wants you to tell him what's the next great thing to do in the world that's going to make people happy, that's going to change the world. And so, who are you? You're the director of user happiness. Well, students for the longest time thought that I was making this up. This was sort of like Santa Claus, doesn't really exist, but it sort of exists. Well, I actually one day said to my students, no, he really exists. The director of user happiness really exists. There's a man named Dan Russell, and he goes around making sure that people understand the importance of happiness. And so, Google is the place it is because of people like Dan. Can I have my water, please? And he thinks about the future. Thank you. He thinks about the future, and you can read his CV online because I know you all can search and I know you can all Google it. But one of his latest things, he says, "I work to invent new mechanisms that let us know more, perceive more richly, and comprehend the world in new ways." And that is Dan. Dan wants to invent the future. He wants to do it because he cares about people. It's not about the technology, he cares about people. And so the person that you're about to hear from, he looks really serious in this picture. Actually, this is, what happened to the lighting again?
I called.
All right, well, lovely. Okay, anyway. He looks really serious in that non-picture that you can't see. But he's not. He's really serious about happiness. And so I want you to give a warm welcome to an amazing person who we are so lucky to have here kick off our thinking about the future of information, Dan Russell.
I know, you don't get to see this often. I like that.
Thank you, Allison. Now let me switch to my presentation. So, let me do one other thing, because I have to do it. I'm going to try something really fun. Oh, darn it. All right. We'll do it this way. Just having too much fun. So what is tempted when you're asked a question like, so what's the future of information? One is tempted to be sarcastic and say, oh, I don't know, it's like kudzu. It's growing, it's networked, it's everywhere. Or to say something like it's like the ocean. But metaphors only get you so far. And so I want to tell you a few stories today, show you a little bit of data, and conclude with an important action item. The first action item is, if you've got a laptop, bring it out. I know you never hear this from your lecturers. If you've got a smartphone, you should turn it on. Turn the ringer off, right? But the point is, we're talking about the future of information. I want you to be connected. I want you to be able to look up stuff as this conversation is going on. I want you to be as smart as you can be. So when I was thinking about this talk, I thought, the future of information, kind of a big topic. And so I started making notes, and Allison only saw about 1/10 of the notes. And so I now have in my hotel room material for a book. And so I cherry-picked a few things to talk about today. And I was thinking, well, what is the future of information, especially with respect to Maryland? And I was thinking, I'll choose a couple topics, and we'll focus in on those, rather than trying to give you everything I could think of in 45 minutes. The first way to think about information in the future is it's going to be social. Now, a lot of you signed up on various wikis, or you know about Twitter, you know about Facebook, and so on. But I want to tell you about something that I do a lot of, which is I go out and talk to users. And one of the most interesting talks I ever had was with a homeless man on this tram in Portland. And I was taking the tram from the airport to downtown to go to some conference. And there's a homeless guy sitting next to me. But he's an unusual homeless guy. See, he had a really big camera with a really big telephoto lens. And it was dissonant. I didn't understand. How could a homeless guy have a camera like this, which is maybe $1,000, $1,500, something like that. So I had to ask him, so buddy, tell me about your camera. Right? He says, oh, I was just coming back from the airport. And I said, yeah. We'll tram from the airport, right? Yeah, I'm a plane spotter. Now, you know about these guys? Probably not. Let me tell you a little bit. They're not all homeless. But there's this international network of people who do plane spotting. Now, you probably know about train spotting. This is the modern equivalent of the same thing. They go to the airport and they take digital photographs of planes as they land, or as they take off. They look for the tail numbers and try to figure out what airplane it is, when it's coming from, and they can estimate by the way it lands, the rough tonnage of that plane, and so on. Right? And so they then get onto the net and they go to the forums and they exchange tail numbers. This counts as entertainment, isn't it? But what's interesting about this particular kind of social computing is that these are the people who figured out about the CIA extraordinary rendition flights. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't somebody who was trying to make sense out of all these random flights of air traffic control. It was tail spotters, the people who have this informal network who realized that there were these planes that sort of had funny markings and they couldn't figure out where they were landing or where they were taking off from, what their cargo was, and they figured it out. So part of the future of computing is this increasing aspect of being social in ways that you might not have anticipated. Social computing, moving forward, is going to be everywhere, and it's being tightly woven in ways that we can't imagine yet. Facebook, Twitter phenomena, all of that stuff is just the beginning. Things like the plane spotters or the crowdsourced encyclopedia known as Wikipedia, which has, I forget the last number I read, but something like 63 million articles in, 240 different languages. It's a phenomenal piece of work. You may not let your sixth grader use it for sole reference, but nevertheless, it's an incredible piece of work with outstandingly high quality. And the social nature of the construction of Wikipedia is a fascinating thing to understand. Another kind of social group that's really interesting is this group called Math Overflow. They're out of Berkeley, and it's a social environment. It's like a wiki space where mathematicians talk to mathematicians. And when I look at it, I can't understand 99% of it. But the fact is, it's a very serious space for these guys to pose questions. You know, gee, are more connected or disconnected graphs on n vertices? Or things about, you know, Bachman, relationships or whatever, right? Fascinating set of things. Papers are now starting to be published, co-authored by the person who asked the question and the person who answered the question. They may not have written a single character of that paper, but they're being co-authors because they're participants in this social media. Social is also being woven into the warp and weft of the stuff that we use day to day. So you all have some kind of a text editor, maybe you're in it now. As you probably know, Google's got some socially enabled software. We've got Google Docs and spreadsheets and a few other things you might have heard about. What's fascinating about this is that it's real-time, synchronous stuff that was all prototyped in university laboratories. And we now ship it, and there are several hundred million users using it right now. You can see people synchronously in real-time editing. You can click up the revision history and go back and see exactly who did what. This is incredibly useful for working groups, for kids in classrooms, who are trying to do group projects. And now you can see by color or by font or by revision history exactly who contributed what, at what point and when in the process. So the kid comes in on Monday and says, oh, my dog ate my homework. Well, I'm sorry, the cloud does not eat your homework. Right? So now we can actually revise that history and back up and see who's doing what. And the social nature of all this computing is a fascinating place to be. You also know that Google provides real-time results from sources like Twitter and Facebook and MySpace, et cetera, right? So you can actually watch things happening in real time. My favorite application, this happened at my house, actually. I was sitting, working away in my office, and my wife says, there's a big cloud of smoke outside, out the back. And I said, gee, that's really big, and it looks really close. So I did this, I didn't query for volcano, I said fire Palo Alto. And there was an immediate feed of tweets and Facebook updates coming in saying exactly what street it was on, and I thought, oh my gosh, my friend lives over there. I'm really curious where it is. So another tweet came through the search page saying, oh yeah, and the helicopter's coming in, here's the URL for the live camera feed. 30 seconds later, I was watching the live camera feed of the fire next to my friend's house. Okay. So I knew that my friend Bob was fine. He might have some paint blistering, but he was okay. It's real time, it's instant, it's social, it's crowdsourced, and it's inevitable. The stuff is coming. And it's leading to a world that is not only socially connected, but is incredibly information rich and dense. What I mean by dense is there's a vision, this is a picture from a few years ago, a vision of a world where we have every edition of every book, every language ever published since the dawn of time. Now recently, the guys in Google Books try to actually count all the unique instances of books, and it's only roughly 162 million books ever published, which is it seems like a lot, but it's not. You know, we actually have a lot of those books scanned already. The issue is not that we have unique instances, we have all the variant versions of it as well. The one that was marked up by Bacon back a few years ago, and all the different kinds of stuff that's out there. So the quantity is really staggering, right? You think about it, we've already scanned around 15 million books. So we've got roughly 10% of the entire corpus of human knowledge in some sense, right? Another way to think about the information flow rates are that 24 hours of video get uploaded to YouTube every minute. So we've been talking for what, 6 minutes? There have been 6 days worth of video uploaded to YouTube since we started thinking. There are X billion images in Google Images. There are roughly 5 billion in Flickr alone, so you can start to add the numbers here. And what's fascinating about this is that some of them are really interesting and deep. And there are, for example, 78,000 anteater images. There's 700,000 lolcats. Okay, now, for all of you who don't know what a lolcat is, this is an important internet meme. Go to your browser and type define : lolcat. Right? This is why you need an open machine. So, the point is, we have this really big index. I wrote down X billion documents because I don't actually know what it is. I was just talking to folks in the indexing team, and they think they know what it is. But there's an interesting aspect of our new information world and our world going forward, which is nobody knows what that number is. Because the moment I say it, it's out of date. Literally, 100 milliseconds later, there's a few 100,000 new documents added to it. Which is interesting, because from an information retrieval perspective, we've always had this notion of precision and recall, fraction of total documents retrieved that are appropriate. Well, I don't know what the denominator is anymore. It's X billion. The world of information in the future is dense and increasingly dense. The fascinating thing about all of this is it's all searchable. So for example, we can trivially go to your favorite browser and type in a query like this: what's the population of Japan? And you can instantly find out 127 million. That's in 2008. Right? You can ask a question like, how tall is the Empire State Building? The reason I'm giving you these simple problems is that when you were a kid, these were not simple. Right? Some of you perhaps remember having to go to the library, physically library, right? And actually walking there. Now, if it comes up in conversation, how tall is the Empire State Building? People could speculate, maybe somebody recalls, oh, it's like 2,000 feet tall, right? And then the conversation proceeds with that as the basis. Now, of course, you whip out your smartphone and you say, how tall is the Empire State Building, and you actually know. So more bar conversations will be grounded in data. And that's one of the futures of information, right? Another thing I find fascinating is the way in which this easy, low-cost access to accurate information changes the way you have conversations about all kinds of things. So you probably read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, right? Most people haven't thought about what 20,000 leagues are. Well, if you're literate, you know a league is a distance of measure, right? Well, what's 20,000 of them? Or more importantly, why would he entitle the book 20,000 Leagues? Most people I ask say, well, that's the depth in which the submarine went, right? Well, you go to Google, you say 20,000 leagues in miles, it will convert it for you instantly, and it will show you 69,000 miles. Oops. What's the diameter of the Earth? It's roughly a tenth that, right? So the point is, even things that you thought you knew, things that you've accepted since you were in the 5th grade, as just sort of part of the background of your cultural knowledge, now become subject to inquiry. You can ask, what's the airspeed of an unladen swallow? And for those of you who are Monty Python fans, realize that's a critical question. Right? And the answer is actually 10 meters per second. You get answers to questions like this. So it's not just that there's a lot of information out there, but it's also coming in these interesting compendiums, these interesting sort of focal things. One way to think about this is at Google we have these crawlers that go out and add stuff. We're roughly adding 1 Library of Congress per day. And that's today's rate. In the future, that rate will accelerate. Now, when I first joined Google about 5 years ago, the crawlers would go out and they would find a resource and crawl it, and it would go into the index pipeline. And it would get into the index probably 4 or 5 days later, quite a bit of time later. Now the index update rate is on the order of seconds. Meaning, you can try this, right? Go update something, let's say on your Twitter feed or something, and then start looking for it in Google, and you'll find it within a minute. It will be already in the index. That is a phenomenal increase. I don't know that we can beat the speed of light in this, but you can imagine where this is all going. Things are speeding up. Speeding up in interesting ways. Not only is the production of information speeding up, but crawling and indexing and accessing of information speeding up. But it's also increasing the speed with which we can think. Let me give you an example. True story. I guess I should say all my stories are true. As you know, we hire a lot of PhDs, say from Maryland or wherever. And a lot of them come in and they give their job talk. And it's usually, this is my thesis, here's my work, here's my results, questions, right? You've all been to those talks. Well, we had one guy come in and he presented his thesis work, which had taken him 4 years to do. And at the beginning of his talk, he said, and my website is here, and I put all my data files there, and you can download them. And the guy next to me starts downloading the data set. And as the candidate is speaking, he's describing his algorithms, he's describing his methods, describing his results. My buddy next to me is sitting in MATLAB, re-implementing the entire thesis. The whole analysis of all the data this kid collected since he started working on it. Okay? At the end of the hour, my friend said, you know, I just reran your analysis, and I have a different answer. Okay, now, my friend is really kind, and he said this in a very gentle way, but think what just happened. Think what just happened. 4 years of work is compressed into an hour. Okay? Now, the kid did the research, right? He had a lot of blind alleys and work that had to get done in the background, and parties to go to and whatever. But now the conversation turned within an hour. Previously, like say 2 years ago, that would have taken at least a couple of weeks. At least a couple of weeks. 10 years ago, it would have taken at least a year. Now we have these conversations about interesting, contentful material that turn within the space of a meeting. I don't know about you, but I've been in lots of meetings where people say, gee, wouldn't it be great if we knew X? And someone looks that up. And they now know the answer. Even though sometimes those are very interesting, hard problems. So the speed of conversation speeds up. The speed of intellectual work speeds up. On the other hand, some searches, some inquiries are still very difficult for us to do. the population of Japan in 1490? You're not going to find an answer. You're going to have to go work it out from first principles, right? How much does the Empire State Building weigh? Again, you could probably work that out, but I don't, at least as of last week, there was no answer on Google. Or why is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a classic? And why do swallows appear so often in the works of Monty Python? Right? There is still a lot of intellectual work that has to happen. Just because we have this fantastic search engine, just because we have information out on the web, doesn't mean that the intellectual enterprise is done by any means. Now we just get to think about more interesting things than how long does it take me to get to the library, and will the Encyclopedia Britannica of 1957 be the most current reference material? Don't have to worry about that now. On the other hand, there are some questions that are very difficult to even frame. For example, I was driving with my family down Highway 5, which is through the Central Valley of California. It's a heavily agricultural region. It is Euclideanly flat. Boom, just plain. And then in the middle of it, there's this funny little mountain range, about 5 miles on a side. What is that? Why is that there? So this is literally my camera taking a picture out the passenger window, click, like that. How do I go from that information to understanding of the interesting geology of that point? Does anybody recognize that? Oh, there must be some scholars in here. That's Amharic. It's the written language of Ethiopia, or these parts of Ethiopia. Okay. Question: how would you search that? Well, turns out we actually have an input method editor for Amharic now at Google. You can download it, and if you're in Ethiopia, you can search the entire corpus of all Amharic documents online. Okay. But another problem: what's that? Right, this is some Mayan writing on a stele someplace in South America. The question is, again, if you're a kid, you're confronted with something like this in a museum, what do you do? There's going to be a little tag on there that says, Mayan, South America. That's not what I need to know. That's wrong. I want to be able to have a method to do this, to take my phone, for example, and do the query, but how do I start? How do I frame these difficult kinds of questions? This is a flower picture I took by walking out the back door of my office at Google. This was blossoming in hillsides. What is it? How would you find out? The botanist among you would say, oh, there are taxonomic cues online. But sure, but I need to know what a superior ovary is in order to use those things. Right? So my meta question to us is, the future of information is what? It's partly the kinds of questions you can ask, the framing you can ask, and how do you get to those questions? My son walked in with this on his arm. Should I go to the ER? What do I do in case that happens? So the search problem is not solved yet. We've made immense strides in the past few years, but there are still crazy hard questions one can ask, but I don't know the answer to it. Now, part of the future of information is that we have to get it into our consciousness that it's not a fixed point. A fascinating thing to think about is the rate at which evolution of content, of input methods, of query mechanisms, all of this stuff is changing with time. Let me give you an example. You probably know about Shazam, which is a software that runs on Androids, runs on iPhones. The beautiful thing, you can query the music you hear. So you're in a restaurant, and there's a fantastic piece of music playing over the music system. You whip out your phone, you launch it, and you say, oh, that's the Rolling Stones. Oh, an archaic band, fine. Okay. But it doesn't work for live music. Right? The reason is, the way Shazam works, or any music record system works, is it takes signatures of what the soundtrack is, and it looks against the catalog and says, oh, last index and voice number 10 million, that's the Rolling Stones or whatever, right? But if you're in live session performance, like Irish session music, you may know the tune or you may not know the tune, and I play a penny whistle, and I was at a music performance recently with these folks, and they launched into some tune, and I have no idea what it is, and I'm totally screwed. Because what do? Right? I'm not going to ask them because they're busy playing, right? And usually what happens is you get a whole bunch of these tunes linked back to back. And part of the problem of becoming a learned scholar in the canon of Irish session music is learning what all that stuff is. It takes a long time, it's kind of painful. Well, this Brian Duggan from Ireland put together a great recognition system called TunePal. Let me show you an example of it here. This is actually, let me just narrate this. In August, I was at that session I showed you, and this is the way it's working. So I'm not playing, I'm listening, I have no idea what this is. But I recorded it, and launched the app. Now I'm playing it back on my Mac, while my iPhone is listening to it. It's listening to the recording I took with my video camera that I got out of my pocket. It's thinking, and what I'll show you in a second, it will recognize this piece, despite the fact that it's not being recorded, with this instrumentation, with this speed, or this acoustic environment. So I fade down the recording music, and the answer comes back, it's Lafferty's. Okay? You click through that, you can get the MIDI file, which is what you hear here. It's exactly the same. It's even in the same key. You click through, you can get the sheet music. This is a fantastic piece, right? What it allows me to do is to make a query over live performance music. It speeds in places never anticipated. Now, there's another way to think about this new evolving sense of inquiry that you can have. How many people have heard about Google Goggles? Have you ever heard of that? Okay. Well, I was at this other university on the West Coast, and there's this really tall building there, and I thought, well, what is that? And so I whipped out Google Goggles, which runs on my phone, and I just shot this little clip of video, and I'll show you. I launch the app, I point the camera at this tall building, I say, take the picture, click, and then it starts to scan the image. And what it's doing is it's doing an image similarity. This is a live image that no one has ever taken before, but it's comparing it against the several billion images in Google Image Database, and you can see it not only recognized it, but knows all the websites that are linked to it. Right? This works for, the reason it works so well is that there are a lot of images in Google Image Database. X billion, right? The world is evolving. The way you can talk to your phone and ask questions of it. You just whip out your phone, hit search, say your question, and go. I got here yesterday by using my phone to use my GPS navigation. Not a new technology. Well, what's new about it is when I pulled up in front of the hotel here, it flipped to Street View. And I could see, oh, that's the door. Got it. It was fantastic. I was literally sitting in my car like this, and the images lined up. I was exactly where the Street View car was. Okay? Start to combine these in interesting ways, and you realize we're living in a new world. So there's an interesting evolution here about the way and kinds of questions you can ask. So let me tell you another little story here about a question you could ask. My son loves Stanford basketball, and we go to a lot of games. And there's a lot of things that go on in Stanford basketball, including all these songs that get sung, right? Most of them I know, but there's one. There's this one. Okay? Now we should all start singing along with me. And here's the lyrics. You know the song, right? Right, exactly. Well, we play it here too. Okay? How many of you know what the title of that song is? Raise your hand. One. Going twice? Nobody else? Okay. How would you find out what that song is? You can't do it because the acoustics in Stanford basketball are so bad, Shazam doesn't work. Right? And my son asked me that question. He said, Dad, I want to get that for my iPod, right? He said, you know, I don't know what to do. And so he didn't know any better. He grabbed the laptop from the kitchen table and typed in the lyrics, which are ooh, 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 ooh. The thing that killed me is it worked. He didn't know that that was a stupid query. And I work at Google, and I know that's a ridiculous query. What I hadn't thought about is that a lot of other people had typed in that same query too. Someone had answered that question, and that was the index point. I was functionally fixated. That is, I thought I knew what Google could do. I had a functional model for the search engine in mind, and it didn't accommodate the expanded repertoire of question answering sites. And so now, he got lucky, or rather, he knew something, or discovered something that I didn't know. So now it's a strategy. Right? When you're asking particularly popular culture questions like that, go for it. Because the way you're formulating a question might just be the way someone else did. And if someone else has answered that question on a QA site, bang, you got the answer. Right? That's different. Right? That's an evolution of the web. I teach a lot of classes on how to search. And one of the things that kills me is that every time I teach a class, I have to spend at least 5 minutes before class going through all the examples to make sure they still work. Right? This sounds ridiculous, but it's not. It's absolutely true. What you have to do is make sure questions that you thought were difficult last week are still difficult this week. Because remember those libraries of Condor Psi that are being added daily? All of a sudden, the answer might be in the index. And you have to model that. You have to keep that in mind. Okay? So, now one of the things about this question asking evolution is that there are all kinds of interesting psychological cognitive effects that go on. We know there are priming effects and there are cueing effects and all this stuff. And it's pretty clear to me that these are really important in watching the way people approach asking the query. So for example, one of the questions I give in my classes, I heard there's an abandoned city in the waters of San Francisco Bay. Is that true? I'll tell you it's true. Right? So that's one way I ask that question. The other way I ask that question is a slight change in wording. I heard there's a ghost town in the waters of San Francisco Bay, right? Now you would think those two questions are essentially isomorphs. They're essentially the same. They couldn't be much different. But you know, this is why we do science. This is why we do studies. It's true. There's a town called Drawbridge. That's kind of all that's left of it. If you do the search for the top chart here is showing the people who were given the problem for abandoned city. Okay. Lower is better here. Okay. So abandoned city, those people are unhappy. Their average response time is 500 seconds to find the answer. The people who were given the question, there's a ghost town, average 425 seconds. Why do I care? Time to result, the amount of time it takes you to complete a search task, is everything. It's always been everything, right? It's well known by librarians that stuff that's far away never gets touched. So access in general for physical items drops off as the cube of the distance. So if you put something on the 7th floor, only the really compulsive people are going to go there. Now the other thing about it, and this is the killer one, these are happiness metrics. Now you know what they look like. They're histograms. But the people who got the question abandoned city were unhappy. Satisfaction score is 0.1. Right? Because they took a lot longer. So the amount of time it takes you to complete the task is directly correlated with the amount of happiness you have. Now that sounds stupid, but it's just true. And it's only like 100 seconds makes a difference. It's not very long. The people we gave that other question, the ghost time version of the question, they were really happy. 2.4, that's really great. That's really good. So one of the things this tells me is that, look, what's going to happen is the web will continue to evolve. We will continue to make better indices and better input methods, better querying mechanisms, all that stuff. But there's still a lot of capacity, a lot of headroom at improving what the searcher can do. And this is, in some sense, the real theme of this entire talk. What can we do to improve the searcher? Let me show you one example. This is, the pink dot here is an eye track. And what you're going to be seeing is this person's eye moving around on the page. This is from a study we did a couple of years ago about a new method of organizing results. It never shipped, it was not interesting. But what's fascinating about this is that here, this guy is trying to figure out what to do San Francisco on a Saturday night. Right? Now, listen to what it does, because I think you'll find it interesting.
Yeah, I want to try and do one last thing. Okay, what do you think? Okay.
There's a query.
Let's see what happens. I'm beautiful kids. Oh, see? They're not giving me a chance, man. They're all for kids. No wonder they would have fine. So you should try an adult. See? That's what I mean. So it's really hard to transfer these activities.
So I stopped the video at this point because the next query is adult activity Saturday night, San Francisco. But even though state search is on, you can still get some sketchy results on. Now we all laughed at that. It was funny, right? Why is it funny? Because you know something that this guy does not. That there are dragons hidden below that query. Right? Why didn't you know that? Well, I don't know, right? It's an interesting question. More generally, what is it that maybe he knows that you don't know about collections of material that exist that you have no idea? Right? If you don't know something exists, you won't think to search for it, you won't think to ask for it. And isn't this the point of a university education, is to give you this sort of liberal, broad-brushed perspective, full spectrum concept of what's available and possible in the world. At least that's one of the points of it. He didn't know that we couldn't show the rest of this video because there would be real adult activities under there, right? Now part of the problem is of our own making. We have been so successful with the web 2.1, 2.3, 2.99 revolution that we've generated a plethora of content. There are web pages, there are news streams, there are patents, there are images, there's all these different kinds of things. One of them is adult content, right? There are many, many different ways to organize, to conceptualize, to cross-cut the content of the web. But if you don't know what's there, how do you think to ask for it? Let me show you a little video clip of something I did the other day. How many of you know that there are three-dimensional models that you can search for on Google? A couple of people? Okay. Very good. If you search for a 3D warehouse, you will get to the Google 3D warehouse, which allows you to then search for building types, and I search for Notre Dame Cathedral here. What I'm going to do here is I look at it, I'm going to download it. This is happening in real time. I didn't speed up any of this. There's no editing here. I downloaded it, I switched to SketchUp, and now you can see I've actually got the 3D model on my laptop. I can then turn, I can start to look at different aspects of Notre Dame. And if I'm a student in the 7th grade trying to understand what a flying buttress is, this is a really great way to understand. So, the question I wanted to frame this with is, what's out there? What's possible? Are interactive 3D models part of your conceptual repertoire? Or are data sets more to your ken? Right? If you go to Google and you type in unemployment in Santa Clara County or unemployment in Afghanistan or whatever, right? You will get access to the UN's data sets. This is the unemployment rate over the past 10 years for Santa Clara County, where I live. You can see the effect of some recessions there, right? But you can then click through and start to compare this with Imperial County, which is a largely agricultural county, Southern California. You can see Imperial County has a lot higher unemployment rate overall, and you can see there the seasonal variation of migrant farm workers come in and come out and so on. Again, you don't know that information is there, you don't think to ask for it. So what this is telling me is that there's a huge amount of stuff we can do. So I've been trying to think about how do I improve our searchers? What literacy do I need to give them? I've got a long, long list of these things, but I'm just going to show you a couple of them right now. And this is partly by way of also sharing some of this information with you. So one of the things I want to understand is how can I help someone understand the search engine result that they search? How do they read? How do they scan that page? And what do they do in order to actually manipulate that? Here's the number one skill we all need to have. And I pose it to you as a question. Suppose I do this query, New York State Library Auction Catalog Reynolds, right? I'm looking for a particular catalog of an auction. I end up here in the New York State Library, and the thing to notice here, right there, there's a 160-page long document. Now what I'm looking for is a particular item in that catalog. And I can open that page in my browser, and I'm going to start looking through that entire thing. How many people know how to find the word Reynolds in that document? Raise your hand. You want to just find the one word, okay? So this is University Island, so I'd say that maybe 2/3 of you. Now let me put it another way. How many of you use the Control F trick or Command F? Okay, about the same notes, good. Just check. So what you would do is type Command F or Control F and then type the word Reynolds and you go down there, right? Notice where the scroll bar is. This is roughly page 110. Okay? The thing that surprised me a few years ago, 2 years ago now, I was out doing a field study, and someone had essentially the same problem. And she was on this document, and she was scrolling through, this is a field interview. She was scrolling through it page at a time, page, and it's 120 pages long, and it's killing me. And I said, excuse me, what are you doing? I'm searching the document. She kind of irritated by my question. And that's when I realized she didn't know Control F Command F. I thought, wow, illiterate. Then I went home that evening and I talked to my wife and I said, can you believe I interviewed somebody who does not know Control F? And my wife said, what's Control F? Oh, you're that person, Command F. Bottom line, she had no idea. And so I started asking around. Because this is fundamental, right? This changes your relationship to electronic text. If you don't know this, you're in a big yogurt. Right? We did a study, well actually a friend of mine at Google did this study because I reported this result that a lot of people don't know Control F and he said, oh, bourgeois. I'm going to test it. So he ran his test and it doesn't matter what all these other experiments are. These are all complex things that we do at Google to try to improve the time to performance, the amount of time it takes to complete a task. This is what he called Dan's Control F. Fantastic name for an experiment. That is the performance gain. So if it's on this side of the line, that's better. That's basically a 12% improvement. Minus 12%. Now remember that diagram about happiness? The faster you complete the task, the happier you are. I can give you 12% of your search task. That's fantastic. And that's over a very large N. So I did a survey, and I've been doing this now for a couple of years, and I asked questions like this crowd here. I've surveyed over 2,000 people at this point. Anybody want to guess how many people know the Control F trick? U.S. English-speaking population? 90% do not. Wow. Right, that's what I said. And so I now teach this in my classes, and almost every time I go out and I'm teaching teachers or something, you should know 50% of U.S. teachers do not know this. Okay? So you in the education community, pay attention. Because inevitably I'm teaching this to a crowd of teachers or a group of people or something, and someone in the front row goes, oh my God! and I realized this person just understood how they could change their life. Now this is a fundamental life-changing skill, right? So there are lots of literacies here. There are easy literacies like that. I can teach you Control F in 30 seconds. Right? I have a YouTube video that teaches it's not a hard thing to do. There are other more subtle skills, and so there's another skill I call anti-reading, which is the skill of looking for terms you don't know as you're doing that search. So some of you might have elderly parents, you're training in elder care, and often you have to go learn stuff about diseases and chronic issues you never heard about before. And you spend a lot of your time anti-reading. Okay? I do. I go through and I'm looking for terms I have no idea. And so one of my questions I give is, what's that small model that people use for when they're sculpting? And so my query here is small sculpture model. And as I'm reading through this, part of what I'm doing is trying to do negative word spotting, words I don't know, because that's often a key to do further inquiry to understand, right? And this is something you as a university academic audience know innately. Nobody had to teach this to you, or rather, somebody taught it to you so long ago you forgot it. But what happens is that people come into my classes and they don't know this, and they see the word, they don't know what it is, not for me, I'm out of here. That's the wrong response. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that there's a tool, a handy little tool here in the Google toolbar called the highlighter, which will automatically do that for you. It will put nice, handy highlighting colors. So, question, how many of you ever use the cache link on Google search? Okay, do you use it for highlighting? Most people do. Yeah. Use this instead, it's much better. There's a whole issue about what cache means and all that. But the point is, if you're looking for highlights or you're just searching for a word on the page, particularly the search results page, you need to do this kind of stuff. Knowing the capabilities of Google is a really important thing, or any search engine. So I don't know how many of you have used cross-language translation search services. Excellent. So what you can do is that there's this tool called Google Translate Search. And the way you find it is you search for that. I don't remember the URL, and neither should you. Nobody should remember URLs. You should be able to search anything you need. So if you need Google Translation Search, you search for Google Translate Search. Right? And the phenomenal thing about this service is you can do a search, and this is Tsuji Yano, who's a Japanese singer I like. And I love this. It gave me the "Did you mean?" Think about what just happened. I misspelled her name in English. It translated it to Japanese and told me I spelled it wrong in English. That's a pretty good trick. You can also do tricks like doing results landing page translation in place. So here I did another search for, just to be fun, Tel Aviv. It did the "Did you mean?" and it said, yeah, there's no Tel Aviv, give me a break. And so it only gave me results for Tel Aviv, which is the right thing to do. But here's a landing page here. This is the Tel Aviv city page. And it shows me the original Hebrew over here on the right. And if you click through, I can ask for just the original page, I can ask for the translated page. Okay? My Hebrew is for Squat. This is a real help for me. Okay? And for people who actually care, you can actually go through and click on any of these pieces of text in the translated language page, translated landing page, and see the original. Again, pretty phenomenal kind of capability. And if you don't know about it, now you do. And you know how to find it. So there's all this stuff about knowing how to use an interface, knowing what's in the search results page. There's a stuck in a mode problem. Then there's the problem of knowing what's a click target. Now, if you look at this page, there's all kinds of stuff on this page. There's stuff over here, there's stuff over here, there's stuff up here. What can you click on? Classically, this was always the blue underlined link. That's what we clicked on, right? Well, the world has changed its thing. So this is the thing you used to click on. But now there are smaller, different color blues without underlines that are clickable, things that only have underlines when you roll over them. There are little icons you can click on. There are green things you can click on. There are images, you get the idea. If you're a newbie to this space, and you don't know what's clickable, that's part of being literate. It's like knowing to turn the page, right? You don't think about it, but when the media is evolving and changing underneath you, the literacy of something as simple as going to the next page becomes a question. For us, this is an interesting problem, because as we design the future of information, we're constantly trying to change the user interface to be better, faster, smoother, all this stuff. And so a couple of years ago, we did this little experiment. I gotta show you, this is so fun. It's rolling a little bit, you can see that blue triangle there? Right there? We added that as a new UI element, and I can show it to you now because it failed. We decided not to launch this. But let me show you this little video because it's really interesting. We asked this person, this is Laura Granka doing the interview here. She asked at the beginning, do you notice anything different about the page?
There's nothing different about this Google page from when you normally use it at home. Yeah. Oh, it's seems that the order of it is clear to read. Okay. It's like, it's like,
Yeah, that killed me too. We ran a whole bunch of subjects, none of them looked at the blue triangles. And we would ask them, what's different? They'd say things like, oh, the font is clearer, or the typography, nothing else changed. And so we ran into this interesting problem that these blue triangles here look like typographic bullet elements, all right? Even though we expected the positive transfer from the Macintosh interface, which uses twisties that look just like that, doesn't work. They're in a different environment. They're in the Google results page. They don't transfer that still. Okay. So another story. This summer I was in Ashland, Oregon. I wanted to go to one of the local wineries, and so I went to Google Maps and I said, give me the directions. And you probably know that there's a walking mode. You can click the button and give you the walking directions. So I walked to the winery, had a good time, came back. The next morning, I wanted to go home. So I went to Google Maps and said, give me the route home. Okay? Did you notice anything odd about this? Actually, first thing I noticed was this includes a ferry. I was thinking, oh, that's possible, I guess, but why would I want to take a ferry? And so there are these sort of weird things, and I was scratching my head thinking, that's funny. And then I realized I was still in walking mode from the previous day. Right, so I was stuck in the mode. It's the same stuck in the mode problem. We know that modes are bad. All the HCI people are going bad on you, right? But I don't know, and we don't know how to work around this. I mean, we have modes in a lot of our products, and it's an interesting problem for UI design. We continue to evolve the UI, but the users also have to pay attention. They have to know what to pay attention to, and that's part of what the literacy is. The literacy of the information of the future. This stuff is changing constantly. So we did another survey. We asked 250 people, what is the maximum child weight for graphical passage travel of baby stroller? Simple question, simple answer, right? All I want is an integer number. But we found that 35% of people got this answer wrong. That means a third of you get this answer wrong. What happens is that if you look here, there are all these numbers, 22 pounds, 32 pounds, 40 pounds, 45 pounds. The one that really floored me was the person who said, the maximum baby weight for this stroller is 120 pounds. Really not apparent. I have colleagues who weigh 120 pounds. And you see what's happening here, right? It's fascinating that there's a lot of interesting behavior that goes on between the person using this technology, this information presentation method, the information access method, and how they actually get the answer back. So one of the things I've been working on, how do we teach search skills? How do we teach people how to deal with the information in the future? How do we do this? So we ran this experiment this past summer, and we basically said, look, giving someone a tip is a good idea, right? Can I give you a precise tip? Like we broke them up into 150 people into a group where we have a precise tip, and a relevant tip, and basically a control group. And tips could either be strategic, in reference to a corpus, or a tactical tip. So kind of important stuff. Well, we gave them, this is an example tip. So there's the question up here, look for a video, and here's the tip, just showing you how to do that. Now, here's the graph. This is why we do science. I expected this is the no-op, this is the stupidest research you're ever going to do, because everything's going to come out positive. Wrong. Okay? The strategy tips are basically flat. There's no difference there. That's not a significant difference. It means the strategy tips didn't do anything. The tips on corpus, that was pretty good. That's not a bad difference. But the feature tips, that's a huge win. So if I can tell you a particular feature to use when you're searching, wow, I've just improved your happiness in using information by quite a bit. Okay? Oh, and here's the really bad news. If you give them poorly worded tips, you can damage their performance by 24%. That's really bad. So parents, careful what you tell your children. But the right tip at the right time, in some cases, can give you as much as a 49% increase in speed. and a 68% increase in accuracy. Those are incredible results, right? So what this means is that we have to teach people about the information of the future with the recognition that it's whatever we say now is not going to be true in a year, let alone 5 years. The new software engineers coming into Google now are, say, 21. They were born in, 89. That means they've had Google for half of their lives. Many of them do not remember a time when they didn't have an email address, or a web page, or a computer at home. These people were born after the introduction of the Macintosh. Right? So for them, change is one of those things that, yeah, I guess, sure, whatever. Right? It happens. So let me give you a quick fly-through of a change of the interface that we did. This is our Maps user interface from 5 years ago. Point out here, the ads are on the right-hand side. It's yellow. Notice it's called Maps. Now, 4 years ago, we changed it. We now call it local. We moved the ads to the left-hand side. The provider of the information is different. Here you now get pictures. We changed it to blue. We added a bunch of buttons here. We're changing the UI. Last year, now the data is all from Google. We now have our Street View guys going out. We have better street data than anybody, so we use our own, et cetera, right? Most of these changes you don't notice. That's according to our master plan. We don't want you to notice the changes, right? But there are a lot of changes over 5 years. New capabilities. For example, under this More button, you can now get the topo maps for that particular place. It's called terrain. A whole bunch of new kind of capabilities. Our struggle is always, and you as a user, your struggle is always, what can I interact with here on this page, and how can I know what it does? For example, how many of you have ever clicked on that button right there? Answer, none of you. Statistically speaking, oh, one guy into that. Oh, Ben, okay, you're forgiven. Okay, how about that one? Yeah, even ends up okay here. Another couple of people. The point is, nobody really did. So we kept evolving the interface. So, what skills do you need to be a literate consumer of this information space? What kind of maps do you need to know about? You need to know what is a map, what's possible. Well, let me tell you, another part of the information in the future is going to be local. Local in an interesting way. So, for example, we now have lots of information about independent different stores, different places, and so on. You can see all that kind of stuff through GPS. That's not surprising. It's now just integrated and as a new kind. So you can actually ask questions like, where's the closest gas station to me now? An interesting question. Now, another study I did, my favorite study, well done, that asked a simple question. This house right here is at 900 University Avenue, downtown Palo Alto. Built about 1890, called the Squire House, 900 University. Okay. I asked 225 Googlers. So this N here, this is not random people. These are the people who built the search engine. Okay? These are the engineers. I asked them, I gave them 7 minutes to find the aerial image of that house taken before 1977. Not a hard problem, right? Okay. This is all the queries they did. This goes on for many pages. You read horizontally. Everyone in black is a Google query for something or other. None of them got it. Well, if you go to look in this book, there's a very nice picture right there. But, oh, it's not in books.google.com. It is in the public library. The public library has a beautiful image archive accessible through Google. Nobody found it there. HistoricalAerials.com has it from 1950. Nobody found it there. But the thing that floored me, that really, really surprised me, is that nobody would have thought about using Google Earth. Okay? Google Earth is, if you don't know it, has this time slider right here. You can take, this is downtown Palo Alto, and I slid the time slider back to 1948. Okay? Look at, take Google Earth, fly to your town, move slider back. Fascinating thing. Nobody thought about that. Okay? So the big question, right, for future information is what's out there? What's possible? What's indexed? For example, could you find I know, there's some librarians here, so ringers, right? But the rest of you find a facsimile copy of Stravinsky's Sacre di Fontana. Right? Okay, I'll qualify it. In a library near you, how would you do that on Google? Well, it turns out there's actually an interface in Google that allows you to get to this pretty quickly. And so it's not that hard to do. But if you don't know it's there, you don't know it's possible, you won't think about it. So, here's what I want you to take away from this talk. When we think about information in the future, we need to think about what are the meta skills that we need to have. It's one thing to have the skills to know how to make Google work now, but I want you to have the meta skill about how to learn. How do you manage your attention? Because this is a whole another hour talk on just how to manage attention alone. And crucially, how do you do research? Search on Google or Bing or whatever is a component of that. It's not all of it. Research is this much larger thing, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we have to know how to integrate search, all this stuff together with things like, with skills like, how do you assess credibility? I call this a meta skill because your notions of how to assess credibility now are based on the historic past. How do I assess the credibility of the Google Earth images from 1948? What are the mechanisms for doing that? And so one of the things to keep in mind is that search and research is not a natural act, right? It really is something you have to learn. Everybody here has learned it years ago, so you've forgotten it. But search is really a skill like any other. You have to acquire it, you have plateau effects, you have loss over time. Keep that in mind. If you don't use a particular search thing for a while, it may change. Remember who. Keep in mind also, new capabilities are constantly arising. New content, new resources, new ways to make inquiries. Google Goggles is an example. UI changes constantly. Pay attention. Pay attention to these things, as does the underlying content. Think, one new Library of Congress a day. Okay. So, in all, the information of the future is going to be social, dense, fast, evolving, and local. And there's another 10 things I could talk about, but I'm not going to. Okay. What I want to do is focus on this last takeaway. What we need to do, what you need to do, what I need to do, is to make sure our students, our parents, our colleagues, our friends, have this shift in their thinking about information. We have to, as learned, literate people, take on this stance of having a personal learn forever attitude about things. Right? Fundamentally, the library did not change between 1900 and 1970. The library, the information spaces we now have it changed daily. You have to learn and practice learning every day for the rest of your professional career. One way to do that is to read a blog. You can subscribe to Google's new product announcements. You can subscribe to Bing's, I don't care, really. I want you to stay in touch with what's coming out and what's available, what's new. To read my blog, Search Research, it covers a lot of this stuff. And I'm trying to effectively move our conversation from prediction about what the future is going to be to thinking about how can we make us all better consumers and users of it. How can we help people become effective researchers? I want to shift so that we understand what it means to do research by the searcher. So this is really a shared responsibility. From my perspective as a representative of Google, we have to create systems that behave predictably. They don't give you arbitrary, random, inexplicable answers. And to understand the entire breadth of what you're trying to accomplish. But from your side as users, you gotta do a little work. Right? You gotta actually understand what's out there. You have to have at least a basic functional mental model of what search is, and not be like the kid who typed in sweaty clothes when searching for information about the ecology of Costa Rica jungles. We have to do this now. This is our job. Get on with it. Thank you.
Questions for Dan?
What's the name of the group?
The name of the Guru song is, it's by Zombie Nation. Craft. That's it, Craft 400, yeah. It's a file on my desktop. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can, you should.
Yeah. Yeah, go use some of that, that's a good idea. Turn on.
How about turning Mark? How about getting checklists?
There we go. You got it next.
Multifunction.
Thank you for your informative and entertaining discussion. I would like to ask the question sort of the other side of the table kind of question. It concerns privacy kinds of issues. Well, it's important to have open systems. Some types of searches and systems you really do not want to have open. You need to have privacy. I'll give you an example on what sort of an official Google reply,
I probably can't give an official Google reply.
or at least what you can give. A patent search. Google has a pretty good patent search kind of system. As for example, if someone did a patent search on really smart data searching, and specifically hardware, new hardware that might do really smart data searching, and a patent search on the Google patent search kinds of processes. There are issues where they would not want that search information, what they are searching, to go to other searchers or even be data mined by Google itself. It certainly would have some interest in who's doing really fast smart data searching. How can that be best addressed to issues where privacy is important to the user for their own happiness, and also there are legal issues where they really need to have one?
Right, so, yeah, I'm not the legal guy, but I will tell you my opinion. I mean, there are many places, let me back up one step. How to secure your own privacy is one of those literacies that I think people need to develop. Because ultimately, the responsibility is going to be yours. I mean, Google or Bing or whatever can go off and implement all kinds of stuff. But there are lots and lots of people very interested in your data. And so I can give you an answer to that specific question. And a specific answer would be something like, well, why don't just use, for example, incognito browsing mode. That way, all the personal identifying information is pretty well hidden. And that's an easy technical solution to that problem. But more generally, there are, for example, systems and ISPs that aggregate that kind of data, and I have no control over that. So you have to figure out where. It's an interesting, hard problem, because how much technical detail do you really need to know in order to be somebody who can preserve their own privacy? And that's a continuing struggle. I don't have a short answer to that. But I think ultimately, people have to be smarter about what it is they do, and we can do what we can.
Is there a go-to person at Google, a chief privacy officer?
We just announced one, yeah. Her name is Alma Whitten. Yeah, in fact, there's a blog post about it, I think, last week.
You can take a few more questions.
Hi, Dan. I wrote down one sentence you said. You said, nobody should remember URLs, which from an HCI standpoint sounds completely reasonable, right? Let people focus on the task, not on the technology, except I have two concerns about that strategy. One is your focus has been on breadth of users, which is important, but it's also, from my perspective, important to remember expert users. Mm-hmm. And this is a very simple, practical thing, but for certainly today and probably for a while, knowing URLs is the fastest way to get something. And encouraging people to learn URLs for specific activities is important. But so anyway, I guess comment number one is what you have to think about supporting experts. But a more insidious issue is that it raises a question of a conflict of interest between Google and your users. Chrome is the only browser that doesn't have a separate URL box from a browse box. And I can imagine all kinds of business reasons why Google would like to intermediate every single thing a person ever does. But if I want to go to a particular site and do that without Google sort of watching what I'm doing, right? That is kind of an important thing, which relates to the privacy question. So there are two sides of the same coin.
Okay, well, I heard at least 4 questions there, but let's
My
take
question only two
the last
sides.
one. If you, I'm not sure I understand, if you're using Firefox, for example, and I go to XYZ website, Google doesn't know that.
Right, but in Chrome, I think, for all I know, Google does, because,
Oh, for all you know, Firefox is sending off your tracking information to someone else, right? I mean, I will tell you the answer is we don't in
Okay.
Chrome. But this goes back to the other privacy.
but if I only type in the beginning of a URL, it's hard to even, sometimes there are things like nyt.com. Is that a new URL or is that a search?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting problem. You know, how much is in the browser versus what's in the search engine, all of that interesting thing. We live, I think, a little bit in a kind of awkward time. I would also say nobody should know HTML. The truth is you need to know HTML. But this is the evil times we live in. Eventually, nobody will know HTML, and that's probably good. I think the other point about, well, we should talk about what URLs you really need to know, because I would love to find some great examples, as opposed to, for example, just bookmarking them, right, if they're private. But if they're searchable, for example, somebody wants to go to Zappos, you use the toolbar and say Zappos. That's all you need to know, right? So we can agree to disagree with that.
Well, except
Okay,
it seems very quick.
sorry, pass the thing, thank you. That was my husband, so I can do that. Okay, why don't you come up to the microphone there, all right. He's also a
We'll finish
computer
that
science
later.
professor.
We'll
that'll
take it
get us
outside.
later.
I'd like to know if you could elaborate a little bit on the differences between Google Earth and Google Maps. We use sometimes, I work in architecture and in images,
Yeah.
and I didn't know about the time shift thing you could do with Google Earth, but we go back and forth. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate about the
Yeah.
differences.
That's a good question, because that was one of the first questions I asked too. So the truth is, Google Maps is this giant repository of geocoded data we've got. You can say the same thing about Earth, right? Except it's all primarily imagery with overlays, like SketchUp models and so on. This is not a prediction, but you can sort of see how those are merging. For example, you can get an Earth plugin for your browser, so that you can do a search in your browser in Earth. And so it sort of seems like those are just two products that are sort of ultimately will share a common data source, but we're not there yet. But I think with respect to the future of information, this will always be true. There will be irreconcilable differences between parties no, that's something else. Anyway, there will be multiple data sets which are then have different ways of being browsed and sourced and so on. So again, it's sort of an artifact of the times. But at no point in the future will all resources live in a single coordinated data set, right? It's just that's Dan's prediction. If I'm wrong, shoot me. But you know, I don't think there's any way that it'll all be reconciled. There will always be pockets of information.
We'll have time after Doug's question, we'll have time for one more, and then we're going to go into our brainstorming, okay, folks?
So Dan, I'd love to talk. If I could summarize it, it's 2 brief messages. One is do what we should be doing for everything, teach the students how to think. And the other is, boy, is this stuff changing fast. So it always looks like it's changing fast when you're at the steepest part of the curve and you're the ant and you can't see out. And it always stops changing fast at some point. Can I get you to think ahead and tell us whether we're at the steepest part of the curve or whether it's just slowly increasing and we've got a lot more increase before we start leveling off?
You're asking for a prediction.
Yeah. Asking for speculation, a provocation.
Yeah, okay. In my role as seer, I would say that given that, well, in his book, you know, Stephen Johnson has this great book about, you know, where new ideas, good ideas come from, something like that. He talks about the available next, I forget what he calls it, something like the next possible states you could move into. Right? And one of the things I find fascinating about software and information technology now is that there seems to be an unbounded number of these things that one could move into. And as we make more and more and more, there are even more and more possibilities, more options. And I don't see that converging back to a funnel at any time soon. So On the other hand, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have predicted Google either. So, I think it's a really hard question to answer. Short answer is no, I don't think there's going any time in the next 5 years.
Okay, one last question.
That was a long head, but you get the idea.
Also, thanks a lot for the talk. We talked a lot about factual information, right? The stuff that we, as a majority, believe to be true and how Google can help us find it. What about all that type of information where it's not just true or false, where you showed me some, I don't even know what it was, right? Where people might say, oh, you have to go to the ER, and then your father tells you, oh, no, this is something.
Right.
And how can Google help us there? Or not even just Google, how can we help in general people finding that information and then going into the second stage of thinking about information and sort of condensing it to making a decision or further information, like the entire process that usually follows for more deep thought kind of research.
Right.
What can we do there?
That's really what I was trying to allude to at the sort of research stuff at the very end. How do you do that synthesis? I mean, it's another part of my life. I do sense-making research. That is, how do people take a large body of information and sift through it in order to come up with inferences about what's true in the field and or derive informed opinions and that kind of thing. That's a whole other area. I think it's a fascinating area. But it also touches on this very hard problem of credibility assessment. So one of the really interesting things that I've come to understand is that because Google is a global company, there are many, many, many different definitions of what's credible. And I no longer believe that credibility is a measure that's universal. That web page is credible, 0.9, that's 0.9. I mean, there's all these sort of interesting multinational, multicultural perspectives on this. And, I happen to live in the United States and I speak English and so on, so I have a particular set of biases. If I lived in Beijing and I spoke Chinese, I'd have a different set of biases. I'd have a different way of assessing credibility. So the ultimate answer is, I'm afraid, you still got to work. We can do things like, for example, doing sentiment analysis and deeper sorts of analysis of the content that's out there, help you find better points of reference for you, but I don't think we're going to be able to say, so who should have won in the governor's election? It's just not, not going to happen. All right.
All right,
Should we
with
run?
that.
Okay, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, those people that are at the doors, please come in. Please come in. All right, wonderful. We're going to get Dan to put a slide back up there that will help us in our brainstorming, but we need to give you a few bits of information. First of all, yes, you will all have time to get up and go to the men's and ladies' rooms and all of that, okay? But it's going to be during the brainstorming experience. We also will be feeding you food during that experience as well. So, no, we won't make you just work. The other thing that will be happening is that we will be rotating topic discussions throughout, and so at a certain point, you're going to hear a noise.
There, do a search on Clarabelle.
That is our Dean of Libraries that will be walking around with the horn, okay? She is